It's awards season in cinema, and while reminiscing about my younger self, staying up all night to watch the Academy Awards and rooting for her favorites to win, I thought it would be interesting to present my best reads of last year in a similar way. In case you were wondering why I'm all dressed up, I would like to give credit to Leonie from the Book Leo for this idea and for inspiring me to create my own version of an Oscar-like awards in literature. It's been really fun and challenging at the same time to come up with categories that would best suit my favorite reads of 2024. If you have watched my previous video, you already know that I read 30 books last year. Out of these 30 books, 16 really stood out. Without further ado, let's start with the first category, Best Lyrical Writing. And the winner is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Such an exquisite piece of art. It was a reread for me, this time in English. Perhaps the reason why I felt it more profoundly and was able to connect with it on a different level. That and probably the fact that it was 15 years later. I think many know the novel as a passionate romance between Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff, a story told in a gothic and eerie setting that mirrors the intense emotions and personalities of its characters, with Heathcliff being one of the biggest enigmas in literature. I recently made a video about the Bronte sisters. There I talked in more detail about Wuthering Heights and tried to look at it from a different angle. While romance is definitely present, there are many social, economic, political, and cultural ideas that are wrapped in beautifully crafted sentences. It has become quite clear to me that Emily Bronte was the least understood of the sisters. Her writing is the most poetic, and I have to admit it's easy to let oneself slide into a surreal, out-of-this-world state while reading her words. I've dreamt in my life dreams that have stayed with me ever after and changed my ideas. They've gone through and through me, like wine through water, and altered the color of my mind. Heaven did not seem to be my home, and I broke my heart with weeping to come back to earth, and the angels were so angry that they flung me out into the middle of the heath on top of Wuthering Heights, where I woke sobbing for joy. If all else perished and he remained, I should still continue to be. And if all else remained and he were annihilated, the universe would turn to a mighty stranger. I should not seem a part of it. I am wearing to escape into that glorious world and to be always there, not seeing it dimly through tears and yearning for it through the walls of an aching heart, but really with it and in it. Be with me always, take any form, drive me mad. Only do not leave me in this abyss where I cannot find you. Oh God, it is unutterable. I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul. I have to remind myself to breathe, almost to remind my heart to beat. Okay, I might have let myself carried away by this masterpiece. We shall move on to the next category, the fanciest writing. And the winner is none other than Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. The Victorian era is known as the golden age of English literature, with a shift towards realism and the portrayal of working and middle classes as a response to the rapid changes triggered by the Industrial Revolution. Victorian writers often struggled with the complexities of the newly formed society, its morals and dilemmas, searching for a meaning in a dynamic world. They used flowery and complex prose to depict vivid images of everyday life and to portray multi-dimensional characters inclined towards reflection and introspection. They focused on psychology and philosophy to internalize their world and to express the content of their minds. Charlotte Bronte made no exception. Jane Eyre is the perfect example of a Victorian literary creation. It was impossible not to fall in love with the writing that still speaks so much to the modern reader. Women are supposed to be very calm generally, but women feel just as men feel. They need exercise for their faculties and a field for their efforts as much as their brothers do. They suffer from too rigid a restraint, too absolute a stagnation, precisely as men would suffer. And it is narrow-minded in their more privileged fellow creatures to say that they ought to confine themselves to making puddings and knitting stockings, to playing on the piano and embroidering bags. It is thoughtless to condemn them or laugh at them if they seek to do more or learn more than custom has pronounced necessary for their sex. I don't think, sir, you have a right to command me, merely because you are older than I, or because you have seen more of the world than I have. Your claim to superiority depends on the use you have made of your time and experience. I can live alone if self-respect and circumstances require me so to do. I need not sell my soul to buy bliss. I have an inward treasure, born with me, which can keep me alive if all extraneous delights should be withheld, or offered only at a price I cannot afford to give. We move on now to the next category, best characters, because how can readers best experience the enormity of a world contained in a few pages, if not through its characters? And the winner is A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. It's been almost a year since I finished the book, and I can still remember all the emotions it gave me. Amor Towles is a master at creating unforgettable characters and placing them in social situations that highlight their personalities, their morals and beliefs, their struggles and dilemmas. As a young adult, he fell in love with Russia's golden age of literature. This is clear from the way he constructed his book. The story spans Russia's most tumultuous decades in recent history, the Bolshevik regime. Similarly to Russian novels, A Gentleman in Moscow has a large number of characters that contribute to the narrative of the story. However, I will concentrate my attention on the protagonist, Count Alexander Ilyich Rostov, who by the end of the book felt like a lifelong friend. A man sentenced by the Bolshevik tribunal to live the rest of his life in the Metropole Hotel. His life could have been over, but it still continued in quite a memorable way. And not just for him, but for everybody who set foot in the hotel, that met him, that became acquainted with him or even befriended him. He was the man that brought a sense of order in a land consumed by its own regime. And for a few hours, I felt part of the story. Gradually, Count Rostov became Sasha, a charming and charismatic friend who proved that we are the ones who give meaning to things, that a single person has the power to make a difference. The next category is one that I care a lot about. It's the best comfort read that I had last year, and maybe surprisingly, given the section we're at, it was a nonfiction, Abroad in Japan, 10 Years in the Land of the Rising Sun by Chris Broad. Chris Broad is a British documentarian and YouTuber who moved to Japan over 12 years ago. My partner introduced me to the Journey Across Japan series, and I immediately fell in love with the videos, and as he already anticipated, with Japan. He has been watching Chris's Abroad in Japan channel since the early years, when there were just a few dozen subscribers, and he'd been telling me for quite some time that we should watch some of the videos together. At last, I gave in at the end of 2023 when we started watching the Escape to Fuji series. A few weeks later, I was buying Chris's book. By the time I read it, I had watched most of his videos. Chris is a great storyteller with a good sense of humor. He is a master at mixing educational facts with personal experiences in authentic narratives. If you are familiar with his videos, it is impossible not to read the book in his voice. However, I want to stress that you do not need to have watched any of his videos to enjoy his book. The only risk that I see is that you might want to check them out afterwards. I know that I went on and rewatched some of them mentioned in the book, and it was a whole new experience having now seen behind the screen. A big part of the book is focused on his early time in Japan that shaped his entire experience. He moved to a rural village in northern Japan to teach English within the chat program. Little did he know that this would change his life forever. From the culture shock, struggling with the language, living in a tiny apartment, discovering a side of Japan that is usually left out by marketing departments in the West, the endless rice fields in rural areas with rapid declining population, unfortunately, the hard winters with massive snowfall, so uncommon to the UK, to meeting who would become his best friend, Natsuki, on a regular night out. Then the love for filmmaking has driven Chris to create a YouTube channel where he started documenting his journey, the good and the bad that came with it. I enjoyed reading about all of that and learning how some of his most beloved and popular videos came to life. Whether it's climbing Mount Fuji, getting woken up by a North Korean missile, spending 1 week with Japan's biggest movie star, traveling across Japan, discovering and promoting less known areas, or documenting the Fukushima disaster 8 years later, it is clear that Chris has a gift of sharing experiences, his and others. I can still remember the touching story of a woman who lost everything in the dreadful 2011 tsunami. How she found the strength to rebuild everything and to spread joy and warmth all around her. Chris was able to capture such a soulful picture and to give those most affected by the disaster a chance to bring their story forward. His videos and writing are that powerful. Let's move on now to the next category, the most mind-blowing book. In my eyes, there is one author that will always live up to this challenge. Therefore, the winner here is I, Robot by Isaac Asimov. The Robots and Foundation series are some of the greatest works of science fiction. For me, probably the best. We see many of Asimov's ideas in today's science and technology. He had an exceptional vision, and despite his inclination towards formal and natural sciences, he had a strong understanding of social sciences and humanities. His Foundation series is based on the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, and by placing the narrative in a distant future, he brings to our attention the spiral that humanity is doomed to follow. I, Robot is the first book in the Robot series which precedes Foundation. Its timeline is pretty close to the present day, and that makes it quite impactful, especially when we take a look at the rapid advances in today's technology. In this book, the 3 laws of robotics are established to prevent humans from being harmed by their own creation. Asimov goes to extreme lengths to test these rules, to push them beyond their limits, and even break them. With the rise of today's supposed AI, I, Robot is a truly mind-blowing book that shows us what AI really means and how far humanity still is from creating a true artificial intelligence. The next category we have is Best Atmosphere. The winner is a D-dur classic that changed society's perception on Christmas holidays during the Victorian era, with many of the traditions born then becoming a trademark of the Christmas we celebrate today. Yes, you've probably guessed it already. I'm talking about The Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I think many of us are familiar with the story in a way or another. There are several movie adaptations, and I have to confess that I have seen most of them, some quite a few times. I have a tradition of rewatching old Christmas movies in December, and the 1951 version of A Christmas Carol is amongst my favorites. I appreciate the social commentary in the book and the moral of the story that led to a shift in how Victorians perceived Christmas as a holiday. If their noble Georgian predecessors used to host generous feasts lasting days on end, and not forgetting their loyal servants and workers, Victorians seemed on the edge of losing this spirit amid the dismal city life that the Industrial Revolution created. With A Christmas Carol, Dickens was able to reinforce old traditions and to create new ones as well. Celebration became more intimate, with family and friends decorating the house, preparing dinner together, being merry and kind, with a charitable heart and a feeling of goodwill. The Christmas spirit is present throughout the book, even though the atmosphere is often eerie and gloomy. Dickens used ambience to strengthen the emotional and moral transformation of Ebenezer Scrooge. If the opening of the book has a discouraging tone, with Bob Cratchit, Scrooge's employee, working in his cold, little dismal cell and waiting for Christmas Day, the only paid day off of the year, the ending has a celebratory tone, with Scrooge raising Bob Cratchit's salary and sending him to buy more coal for the fires warming their office. Okay, we go now from the Christmas atmosphere to the best nostalgic vibes. And the winner of this category is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. It's a book I learned about on Instagram, and I kind of went in blindly with it. I knew it was about video games developers, and the person who recommended it really loved it. That and the fact that it was set in the 90s. As a kid who grew up in the 90s, I simply could not resist it. It was nostalgic to revisit those years, and I loved the pop culture references that brought context to the story. I also played my fair share of video games and couldn't help but be transported in time to when I was playing Super Mario on my TV and replacing controllers every other week. I'm sort of a movie geek as well, in case it wasn't clear from the intro or this whole video, for a matter of fact. So movie references like The Matrix or Ghost in the Shell were really satisfying. I've talked a bit more about the book itself in my media review video, so if you want to hear more about it, you can check that out. If not, I will only say this line from the blurb. It is the 90s and anything is possible. For the next category, I chose a book that I read in the last days of the year and made me feel like I've always known a place half across the globe that I've never been to. The award for Best Sense of Place goes to Homecoming by Kate Morton. I kind of went in blindly with this book as well. The title and its cover draw my attention, and it is astonishing how our minds work sometimes, connecting dots from here and there that our conscious minds are rarely aware of. I initially saw the local translation of the book, which has a broken teacup on the cover. My mind immediately wandered to the Japanese tradition of gluing broken things back together as an acceptance of the inevitable things in our lives, the enrichment and beauty they might bring to our imperfect world. That, combined with the title, Homecoming, made me think that I would be reading a story about acceptance and reconciliation, at the end of which the characters become reunited with their heritage. And I was not far from the truth. However, the book is set for the most part in Adelaide Hills and has nothing to do with Japan or its traditions. I loved that I got to be surprised by the story and by the turn it was taking with each page. It's a slow-paced novel and the author does a wonderful job painting vivid imagery of its setting. By the end of the book, I was familiar with all of its places. I could picture the landscape with its fauna and flora. I could see the curve of the streets, the paths the people of Tambilla town walked on so many occasions, their homes, the sign for Summers and Sons shop, the walnut tree and the rose garden at Halcyon Manor, the water hole that was so refreshing during hot and dry summers. It was as if I had been a tenant of the place myself. We move on now to the best mystery thriller, and the winner of this category is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Written as a Greek tragedy, The Secret History has one of the most memorable first lines that divulges exactly what's going to happen in the book. I think I will not spoil you if I read it to you. The snow in the mountains was melting, and Bunny had been dead for several weeks before we came to understand the gravity of our situation. Imagine you start reading the book and you see this line. Then characters are being introduced and you meet Bunny, whose fate you already know. What do you do? Well, I was so intrigued that I kept reading eagerly to find out how it all happened. And that was the thrilling part of it. As Donna Tartt quoted Alfred Hitchcock in one interview, I will do the same. There is no terror in the bang, only in the anticipation of it. Suspense cannot be built up by throwing a bomb out of nowhere. That is at most a surprise for both the public and the characters. But let's say we have two characters sitting at a table and there is a bomb underneath. The public is aware of it and knows it's going to explode at some point, but the characters have no clue it's there. The anticipation is what keeps the public engaged. Donna Tartt did the same in her book. She revealed to us the crime. We knew exactly what was about to happen, but the characters didn't. And with each turn of the page, we become more and more absorbed by the story, anxious to see its climax unfold and watch everybody's reaction. The next category for these awards is Best New Author that lived up to the hype. It's a new author for me that I haven't read before, despite being very popular. And the winner is Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read two of her books last year, Daisy Jones and the Six, which I talked about in my mid-year review, and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which I enjoyed just as much. Both of them have been really fun to read and are written in a non-conventional format, similar to a series of interviews. This means that we are dealing many times with unreliable narrators, so we need to be vigilant and read between the lines to make our own judgments. The books are hard to put down and it's easy to get immersed in the stories. Both of them depict celebrity lifestyles from different eras of the last century, from the booming and glamorous 50s to the groovy and scandalous 70s and 80s. Even though I have not lived in those decades, it's always interesting to read about them, especially since there is a whole collection of movies and music created back then. Taylor Jenkins Reid truly manages to capture the vibes of those respective eras. She also knows how to keep the readers engaged with her vibrant stories of success and failure, friendship and betrayal, ambition and power, and maybe the most intriguing thing from both these books, forbidden love. Now, before we get to the most anticipated category, my favorite book of 2024, I would like to make some honorable mentions. I will start with Catch-22 by Joseph Heller and American Pastoral by Philip Roth, two classics that depict American society, and I would add society in general. I've talked in more depth about both these books in a separate video in case you want to check them out. Another book that I really enjoyed last year was Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano. It's a heart-wrenching story of four sisters that resemble the March sisters in Little Women. The classic novel is also quite often referenced by the characters, along with Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, which for some strange reason will always remind me of this scene in Breaking Bad. As I was reading Hello Beautiful, I kept wondering where the title comes from. This is revealed quite far in the book and has such a touching background that will most likely make you see some things in a different light. The last book that I want to mention here is Happy Place by Emily Henry. I think Emily Henry is my favorite contemporary romance author. Her books are fun and emotional at the same time, and I like that she strives to give meaning to her plots and characters, and not just force some out-of-the-blue situations for the sake of romance. I'm also a sucker for small-town stories where everybody knows everybody, and Emily Henry always gives me Gilmore Girl vibes. A show that, between you and me, I'm currently watching from beginning to end for the third time in my life. Okay, and now for the most awaited category, we have the best book of 2024. It's a subjective pick for me, and I am beyond grateful for discovering it. While I was working on my Bronte Sisters video, I looked for a book written by the less famous third sister. In her short-lived life, she managed to write just two books, Agnes Grey and The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. I'm not sure what exactly made me pick the latter, but here I am, presenting to you my best read of last year, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. I felt this immediately after I finished the book. While Anne didn't write in the same lyrical or fancy fashion as Emily or Charlotte, she did have something quite special. She used her personal experiences and observations to depict reality as it was, no sugarcoating anything, being it the most disturbing thing to witness. This scandalized conservative Victorian society quite heavily and doomed her novel to become a forgotten classic. After Anne's death, Charlotte prevented the publication of a new edition. Nobody can know for sure her true motives, but her own words from back then indicate that writing the novel consumed Anne deeply and might have represented a contributing factor to the degradation of her health. It is also believed that she wrote one of the characters in the book based on their brother, Branwell Bronte, who lived a dissolute life which ended prematurely. In my Bronte Sisters video, I refer to The Tenant of Wildfell Hall as the true feminist novel in the family, and one of the first of its kind. It is unfortunate that only quite recently, about 1.5 centuries after its publication, did the novel start to get critical acclaim. And having read and appreciated the book, I feel it my duty to recommend it as well. With this, my version of a literary Oscar-like words comes to an end. I would also like to hear about your favorite reads of last year. Thank you for watching, and I wish you to have a wonderful and fruitful reading experience in 2025.